Well, good morning. Happy July. It's our annual monthly webinar, Risk Management, this one. I'm Stan Stahl, founder of SecureTheVillage. We turn people and organizations into cyber guardians. And as I said, we'll be talking about cyber risk management today. You'll meet my two guests in just a moment, both associated with one of our sponsors this month, Pepperdine Graziadio Business School and their CYRP program. And one of the things we absolutely should not have pushed the button quite yet, risk management, there we are, is our annual cybersecurity risk conference, Cybersecure SoCal 2019. This year, the theme is cybersecurity as a team sport, building a winning cybersecurity team. And we'll have as our keynote speaker, Brad Ross, who's a fellow at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. The date.
Ron Ross.
Did I say something wrong, Howard?
It's Ron Ross.
Oh, got it. I missed their name. My bad. Thanks, Howard. Gee, we only looked at this slide half a dozen times, talk about risk management. Stay tuned on that. But the date is correct, October 17th. Mark your calendars. And we got early bird registration going on right now. So it's a good time to register. I want to start this before I even introduce my guests with Dilbert. I mean, how Dilbert is always so good at these kinds of things. Boss saying, how can you be sure there are no unforeseen risks with this plan? And Dilbert properly says it's not possible to know if one has considered every risk, therefore we can never be sure. And the boss says, so I can still blame you for any problems that pop up? And Dilbert says, yes, that part of the process is still intact. Well, we're going to try to get past that a little bit. We can never know all the risks, but with my great panel today, we're going to begin discussing some of these things. Howard Miller, Charla Griffy-Brown. Howard, introduce yourself, please.
My name is Howard Miller. I'm a Senior Vice President at LBW Insurance and Financial Services. I head our technology division called Tech Secure. So I'm focused on risk arising out of the use and dependency on technology. I'm a certified risk manager, certified insurance counselor, and proud to be part of the advisory board with Dr. Charla Griffy-Brown at CYRP at Pepperdine Graziadio School of Business. And looking forward to discussing risk management from a cyber perspective today.
That's super. Thank you for being a guest. Now, this is what, your third time on these webinars, I believe?
Yeah, I'm trying to rack them up.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, you haven't hosted Saturday Night Live yet, so there's still an upside. Yeah. And then Dr. Charla Griffy-Brown. Charla, so grateful to have you here. Thank you so much. And again, please introduce yourself as well.
You bet. Well, thank you so much, Stan. And it's great to see you, Howard. What a privilege to be here. As you can see, there's some of my jaded past on this slide. I am a professor of information systems and technology management at the Pepperdine Graziadio School of Business, and I have the privilege of chairing our Cyber Risk Professional Certification Advisory Board. And being on the SecureTheVillage Leadership Council. I serve on several corporate boards as a director, and I teach in our Executive MBA program, our Masters of Science in Applied Analytics program, our Fully Employed MBA program, our Full-Time MBA program, our Digital Innovation concentration, and our Applied Analytics concentration. And I am just super excited at the things that we're able to partner with SecureTheVillage on in order to reach out and create a space for conversations like this one that equip us better to address one of the grand challenges that we face here in the 21st century, which is cyber risk and cybersecurity. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I'm sure there's other things that I've left out of my my history, but you can look me up on LinkedIn. Please connect on LinkedIn.
Well said, and I'm grateful, truly grateful that you're here with us, and all the work that you do, and that's a segue to the next couple of slides. Tell us a little bit about the CYRP program, Charla.
Absolutely. Well, Howard and members of our board like Howard who come from different segments of government and industry, who are CISOs or have worked the FBI or attorneys, have helped us develop a really solid program to equip business leaders to have the ability to ask the right questions and to build solid programs as executives and leaders. So our goal is to help you as business leaders create bottom line and top line opportunities, not just protecting against risk, but optimizing risk, which is something that we want to talk about today. So you learn how to build your leadership currency, interact with experts who are a part of our CYRP program, join the community of people along with Secure the Village that are working to create a safer civil society. And we have real tools and real applications. So I love this program. I love teaching in this program. That's part of our executive education. And I think we have one more slide here.
Yes, we do. What are the students saying about this? So, yeah, absolutely. And I find this just because I was at the obviously Cybersecure LA last year, which we worked on together. That was just so valuable, and just understanding the challenge we face as a society, as a nation, as a people, if you will, around cyber. It's brand new. We've started learning how to protect ourselves millions of years ago when we came down from the trees or whatever, or went up into the trees for protection. And double entry bookkeeping is 500-600 years old.
Yeah.
What we're talking about cyber is like brand new, and that you're doing just such phenomenal work here. And these quotes kind of illustrate it as well. This is exactly what we need to help move the conversation forward so that we can wrap our heads around all of this and kind of figure out collectively as a people, how do we handle this stuff? So what we're going to be talking about today, the cyber risk threat landscape, enterprise risk management context. We'll be looking at frameworks, at options, and this is a new thing I see. And how do we optimize all of our options? How do we make strategically sound risk management decisions? And that, of course, plays right into, well, how do we measure this stuff in a more profound way? I always like the difference in examples between, you take 100,000 people of various ages, and the actuaries can tell you, within a couple of people, how many people are going to die over the next year from each of the categories, the size, what sex and what age, blah, blah, blah. We can't do that in cyber. It's like, duh, we don't know yet, but we got to know. And we've got to move in that direction. Charla, why don't you kick us off substantively now with, let's talk about the global threat here. This truly is.
Well, I can't see the list of those who are joining us, and there could well be members of law enforcement and those who actually are dealing with the cyber criminal element as we speak on a daily basis. This was drawn out of a conversation. Many of you may know MK Palmore. He's a former student of mine, and he's on our board. He works for Palo Alto Networks as their CISO, and recently retired as the special agent in charge of cybersecurity, FBI, San Francisco. So in our conversations, one of the things that we find increasing is the ability to organize the global criminal element in cybercrime is certainly elevated. We did an analysis of cybercrime business models a few years ago and presented this to the Pacific Telecommunications Conference, and they're extremely sophisticated. As an executive MBA professor, it was truly impressive to see the monetization of every element of what they can steal or cheat. And of course, the dark web marketplaces continue to proliferate. And I just mentioned these attempts to monetize every aspect of fraudulent activity. And that's certainly the case with cyber criminals staying and watching and doing reconnaissance sometimes for 120 to 160 days on average, so that they can certainly press forward with different nefarious exploits. It would be remiss if we didn't mention that this was a borderless cyber criminal enterprise, and that ultimately that's one of the complications, and certainly the complications that law enforcement deals with. We tend to, as a group, one of the reasons we're focusing on this as a team sport in cybersecure Southern California is that we oftentimes don't have the focus that our cyber criminal counterparts do, and are not as coordinated as they are. And yet they are able to pull from a lot of different entities in order to achieve their criminal objectives. There's little consistency right now in prosecutorial interest, jurisdiction, capabilities in different countries. So that creates a significant challenges for the ability to hold cyber criminals accountable. And there's a lack of certainty on how to really address this challenge, which is escalating. So we have, 7.6 billion people in the world, 7.6, 7.9. We have approximately 8.6 to 8.9 billion connected devices. So the attack surface is certainly increasing, and ultimately, it's only a coordinated effort which will enable us to really address the cyber threat. And you can kind of change the slide if you want.
Yeah.
Well,
Charla mentioned
go ahead, Howard.
the increase or the efficiency in monetization, and certainly all of that money is tax-free. So the cyber criminal enterprise is growing substantially with a large amount of money, of which they're purchasing automated tools. So
correct.
Essentially, we're kind of fighting Skynet here, and it is kind of automation versus automation on both sides, with endpoint detection and response solutions coming out, but also on the criminal side, they're also trying to advance. So it's a heated battle, so to speak.
Yeah, and I would only add to this, the last bullet here is one of the things that just concerns me, as someone who likes to believe I'm a patriotic American, how really disconnected we are at a uniform approach to how are we going to deal with these things. I mean, we're living in a time when we become very tribal, and the enemy has that ability to slice and dice right through our tribalism to hurt us. And until and unless we can come together as a people, they're going to have that advantage is something that they're going to continue to have. And I think that's
I would have one more point in regards to Charla was talking about the number of connected devices and the amount of people on the earth. And I think it was in 2017, Risk-Based Security said that there was over, like 7 billion account records compromised. Yeah. So essentially, I mean, we could consider that almost all of our identities have been compromised at this point, multiple times over. And this is all factoring into the evolving landscape, not only in feeding social engineering, but in also evolving legal regulatory schemes such as GDPR and what's going on with CCPA in California, and the loss of 87 million records through a third party with Facebook is all making people realize the importance of privacy, which is an aspect of data. And in speaking with Anne Kevorkian, who is a privacy commissioner for Ontario, Canada, she has her own consulting firm. Privacy is integral in our liberty and in kind of fighting fascism, where if you cannot maintain a certain amount of privacy, it becomes very difficult to, to coordinate your efforts against an oppressive force. So, these are all factoring into this evolving situation.
This is such important points, and I cannot emphasize enough that this touches civil society in every conceivable way. Our economic system, our political system, our health system, how we work, how we play, and ultimately our institutional democratic system. So it's extremely important that we move beyond the conversation to some hard tools and some new ways of thinking. And one of the things that I'm hoping that will come out of the next 45 minutes we're together, whatever, is that we have a shift in our mental model, because that's really what we need in order to be effective in addressing this challenge together in the 21st century.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that point, let's just move ahead.
Let's move ahead.
Okay, so what are we going to do about it is the ultimate question. But here's the trends that we're seeing. And again, go ahead, Charla. Why don't you talk us through this?
These are just, and I'm sure everybody on this phone call has experienced some of these quite recently, from the continued social engineering and spear phishing, credential theft. Some of the basics are just neglected, which just enhances the opportunity for compromise. According to the FBI, there's a lot of targeting, of course, the financial service industry, which makes sense. Bank robbers go to the banks, right? So it's the opportunistic criminals, cyber or not, are opportunistic. We see an increase in the targeting of the healthcare industry and business intelligence, which I think is important to keep in mind and have top of mind. And there's a continued, as we just spoke of, lack of resources and proper attention to this apparatus from the senior executive level on down. Most executives, as I mentioned, I work on corporate boards, I work with executives all the time, and it's very difficult for them to see this, as we're hoping they'll see this today, as an enterprise problem, as opposed to if only the IT people could make the bad go away. It really is something that we as an entire enterprise have to think in a different way in order to be effective in addressing.
Yeah,
and this is why the CYRP program is so important in connecting with the executives and also the practitioners joining in that conversation with the executives.
Yeah, as we continue to say, I think somebody said cybersecurity is a team sport. It takes all of us playing together. So real quickly, let's just take a quick look at who are these threat actors, a brief look at them.
Absolutely. We're seeing more of the nation state actors. We understand that that is becoming a more and more pressing concern. Still, the primary challenge are the financially motivated criminal threat actors. And I can't emphasize enough the insider threat, those who are compromised either intentionally or unintentionally, particularly when it comes to that business intelligence that we're seeing becoming a focus of cyber criminal activity. So I know we want to get to the punchline, so I'm anxious to move forward with what do we do with all this?
So Howard, good segue to discussion, a language discussion. If we're going to change people's paradigms, we got to start by agreeing on the language. What do these terms mean? So talk us through, Howard, some of this stuff. So what is risk?
Right. So to be successful, you need to have some common terminology to effectively communicate and achieve your risk management objectives. And what is risk? So risk, the undesirable effect of uncertainty on achieving objectives. And the goal of risk management. Oh, well, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the undesirable effect of uncertainty.
Yeah.
So we've got uncertainty. Some of it can lead to undesirable things happening.
Right. And so this is coming from the OSEG. These are definitions from OSEG, but what would be the goal of risk management? So to minimize risk, right? Then we kind of look at it from a mirrored perspective. What is reward? Reward would be the desirable effect of uncertainty on achieving objectives.
So give me an example.
Well, you have an opportunity and there's uncertainty in it, but you achieve the opportunity and you create a profit, or you create goodwill or improve your reputation. So those would be desirable effects of an uncertain situation on achieving your objectives. And what is the goal of reward management? I just made this up. It maximize reward. So then you start to look at enterprise risk management. And I think we have a definition This is from the National Alliance. So enterprise risk management, a systematic process of identifying, analyzing, assessing, and responding to all risk and rewards, regardless of the source, that affect the achievement of the organization's strategic and financial objectives positively or negatively. So I kind of favor the OSIG model where risk is considered negative, but here we have a definition of risk management. And if you're responding to risk and reward, why do they call it risk management? And here's where our predominantly negative language starts to fail us. And I believe the goal of enterprise risk management is to optimize risk, reward, and sustainable growth. And so that kind of gives you a backdrop on how to look at a bigger picture between traditional risk management and an enterprise approach where we're looking at both positive and negative outcomes.
So we're driving down the road. Our objective is to get, say, from Los Angeles, let's say we're going to San Diego, and we want to arrive by a certain time. There's uncertainty. There could be traffic. There could be accidents. Our car could overheat. We could get a flat tire. Or traffic could be very, very good and easy. And so there's a risk we'll get there too late. There's a risk is a funny way to say it, but a risk that we'll get there early, probability that we'll get there early. Enterprise risk management is optimizing all of that.
Yeah, it's looking at both risk and reward. And maybe we pull over on the side of the road and help someone with their tire, and it turns out to be the CEO of a large company, and we wind up making a sale. So I don't know. But
if I could jump in, I also want to say there's obviously an opportunity in San Diego. That's the reward. Right. You want to get there, right? It's worth taking the risk. You're evaluating the risk of getting there. You could be killed on the way. There's an existential threat. Driving in traffic comes with an existential threat, right? So risk optimization is about understanding, just as in business, if you want to make that profit, there's some risk that's involved. So how do we effectively not minimize risk? Because then we're going to remove opportunities for innovation. We're going to remove opportunities for profitability. We are going to minimize opportunities for disruption and creating entirely new and better ways to do things that are critical for advancing civil society. So risk is an important part of this risk-reward optimization. We can't just minimize it. If we do, then we end up continually making decisions that are also an existential threat. So we'll just lay that on the table.
Yeah, great point. You know, kind of about like Stan, when you talk about information security, if you were to implement full security, it would be very difficult to do business. So there needs to be a balance of those two objectives.
That's right. If one wanted to truly minimize cyber risk, take all these computing devices and dig a big hole in your backyard and throw them in and cover up the hole. There is no more cyber risk, but nor is there any of the good things that we have. Yeah. Let's go on. Let's look at, and Charlie, talk us through this next slides. The cyber risk management frameworks. Here's a handful of them. Certainly not all, but get us started.
Yeah. These are just a few. I think the first step in building out these programs, obviously, is to identify the crown jewels. And then, of course, as we move into our thinking on risk, we need a framework for doing so. And there are plenty of them out there. This is just actually some of them. And what this demonstrates is that they have some things in common. Some of them have the ability to help you prioritize cost-benefit compliance, flexibility, quantitative analytic and yet they also have some differences. So one of the most confusing things that business leaders and executives have to address is, well, which one do we choose and how and why? And I know that Howard is working on some new ways of thinking about cyber physical threats, which I think profoundly impact that question and help us advance our understanding of these standards and what they are and what they should be from a more integrative and holistic approach. So do you want to talk about that a little bit, Howard?
Yeah, sure. I joined a committee with the Society of Automotive Engineers called G32, which is working on cyber physical system security. And this could include critical infrastructure along with supply chains. And as we were looking to approach this from a risk management perspective, a lot of the frameworks have common objectives. So if you were to look at, say, the controls involved in CIS, and you go through 1.1 through 1.7, included in every one of those is going to be the word inventory or identify, and then the last one, authenticate hardware assets. So basically, if you don't know what you're up against, you can't do anything to protect yourself. And identification is the first and most important step in any risk management framework. When you look at NIST CSF, the cybersecurity framework, identify, first one, protect, detect, respond, and recover. In the NIST RMF 2.0, it talks about categorization, selecting, implementing, assessing, authorizing, and monitoring. And it also has a preparation aspect. And obviously, when you're categorizing, you're preparing to identify and categorize. So you're seeing some similar themes here. ISO 31000 also has a risk assessment, includes identification, analysis, evaluation to risk treatment. So typically, a risk management framework is going to have 5 to 6 steps. And in the article that Charla and I wrote for the Journal of Applied Business and Economics called A Framework and Methodology for Assessing Cyber Risk for Business Leaders, we kind of break down a risk management into a more simpler cycle. And essentially, basically, the cycle's going to be evident in any risk management process because the world's going to evolve. The environment's going to change, your organization's going to change. So you always need to kind of go back and evolve with the changing risk. And the only constant is change. So on the, if you look at it, you know, you could break it down into identify and analyze, control the risk and finance the risk, and then implement and monitor. And I think there's 2 key objectives, really, is how do we prioritize our risk because we only have so much resources, time, and ability to tackle these issues, and how are we going to protect our organization? And in that respect, you have to be able to kind of break these things down, and you start to look at the exposures, be it assets or potential liabilities. What are the causes of loss? And ultimately, risk will break down into frequency and severity. How bad is it going to be, and how likely is it to occur? And you can look at that from a quantitative and qualitative perspective, and then determine that impact and match that with your risk appetite, your tolerance, and capacity. So your appetite would be the risk you're willing to take on. The tolerance would be more of, you know, what your organization is unwilling to exceed. And then the capacity, how much risk can you take before you're basically gone? And I think the other key aspects of looking at this with our committee was that there needs to be some type of scope and boundaries of an information system when you look at it. And also categorizing the information. What type is it? Where is it located? What are the legal ramifications? And I think the final thing I would add is that risk management frameworks need to address kind of a top-down to controls approach, looking at it from an executive perspective, from a business process level, and from an operational level. And I think those are some of the key aspects of risk management frameworks.
That's fascinating. Charla, you want to add anything to this, or?
Well, I think we've covered, just everything that you need to know to kind of start putting in your mind, how do we break this down as an executive or leader into something that's palatable? And,
Yeah.
and I think, Howard, you did a fantastic job of just
Thank you.
helping us think.
Yeah.
It can seem like you're swimming in an ocean of potential frameworks. So
Yeah.
the goal of our paper was, how can we actually distill this like moonshiners into something is more
Yeah.
potent and
Right.
and perhaps just as
Yeah.
powerful. So
Yeah.
and that's kind of the genesis of what we wanted to talk about today in terms of changing this mental model.
Yeah. Well, and to that end, then let's move to the next slide, which begins now to, okay, so what are our choices? We got risk. What do we do about it? I mean, using the trip to San Diego, well, one thing we can obviously do is avoid it, avoid risk. We don't have to go to San Diego, or we can go to San Diego in a different route or something else to do that. But why don't one of you pick up the ball on the rest of these options? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Stan, you said right. Like the first step is to avoid it, but with digital risk, can we really avoid it, right? We can take all our computers and dig that hole like you talked about and be unable to communicate and do business. So from there is how do you minimize the probability of something happening? If it does, can you minimize the severity of that? And can you contractually transfer that risk? And those are some of the key aspects of looking at any risk. I think that there's an inherent level of risk in any type of activity. And then after you implement controls to minimize frequency and severity, you have that residual risk, right, Stan? And then from there, you can consider maybe you want to take some of that residual risk and maybe transfer that to an insurance company that could pay for that loss in exchange for a smaller premium. And that can be one option from a risk transfer standpoint.
And from what you said earlier, from what that earlier discussion around there's risk and there's reward, and the language is kind of obscures those things when we use the word risk. But what is it to exploit a risk?
Yeah, it's essentially, getting a competitive advantage. I think companies are starting to realize, and we can talk about this when we bring up that term trust, is that putting in information security controls and even building your reputation on protecting your customers and data and privacy is a win. It's a win-win, and it can actually differentiate you in the marketplace. And other companies that fail to do so and are more focused on the reward without mitigating some of the risk that could destroy that objective, wind up in a situation where the other company that put themselves in a better position to be more cyber resilient could potentially buy out that company at a lower cost because they survived and they're doing the right thing. And I think as a consumer, I'm looking for companies that are looking out for my interest as well.
Yeah, I think these are really important points. So my son, who was, who's 12, he rides the bus to school, and he was riding back, and we live in an area where there are bears. And in the spring, there was a bear and a bear cub, and the bus driver stopped and still let them out, having seen a bear and a bear cub. And his advice was walk home with a friend, preferably one that runs slower than you. So thank you for that life, that life lesson.
Yes.
Thankfully, no children were, the bears are actually, they kind of leave you alone anyway. But anyway, I think this illustrates the point in part of what Howard is saying. If you have invested optimally, then you will have the opportunity to, these cyber criminals are opportunistic. So your opportunities to expand your market share if one of your competitors has not made that investment and is attacked, your opportunities to increase your reputation, to actually advance new initiatives because you've got the right investments, and to do those with agility and resilience increases. And we have some numbers to back that up. We've been working on some papers to help companies make those evaluations, and some of the frameworks that we were just looking at, I think that Howard was talking about CIS, help you do that too. How much do I need to invest in order to ensure that I, as an executive, can make decisions rather quickly and take advantage of new opportunities to increase my top line as well as protect my bottom line.
Yeah.
So
yeah, great
I think
points.
these are all important points.
And I think from my perspective, my focus is about sustainable growth, which is a long-term perspective. And over time, you may be driven by sales because that's usually the lifeblood of any company. But if you don't address risk, then it can destroy all your objectives. And so I think that optimization with a long-term sustainable growth mentality is how you can change your mindset and achieve success.
Well, and I would add to what you're both saying, go back to the trends chart. And if, for example, let's say hypothetically cybercrime were falling rather than rising, one might want to make the argument, well, I don't have to invest in protecting my information, blah, 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 because my competitors are not going to be hit by cybercrime, or less likely to be hit, so I'll have fewer opportunities to exploit. But given the reality that cybercrime is increasing, the likelihood of either your company or your company's competitors getting hit is rising.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Now it gets to Charla to, you don't have to outrun the bear, you just have to outrun your competition.
That's right. That's right. Your best friend.
Your best friend. That's right. Yes. Well, let's shift the metaphor, if we might, from bears to sharks,
Right.
and talk about risk optimization.
This is a real change in mental models when it comes to risk. And I was mentioning to you both earlier that last week I took my son diving with sharks. We both like to dive, and we did some night diving when sharks are around. This is not us, by the way, so you don't need to report me or anything. But but these are two divers who are marine biologists, and my brother is a wildlife biologist. And one of the things that we know is that in order to advance our ecosystem, we need to understand all of the creatures that are part of this complicated web. We also know that in order for our economy, our planet to proliferate, we have to be stewards of our oceans. And so you have people like these two marine biologists who are very, they understand these rewards. They're very clear on the fact that that it's important and noble work that they're doing, which is why they are on the ocean studying this tiger shark and these other sharks that are there, right? And they also understand that there's a tremendous amount of risk, but in optimizing this risk, they know that divers are not sharks' favorite foods, that there are ways that they can behave which will minimize the risk of an attack, but increase the risk of the reward, which is their ability to understand and explore and advance marine biology, which is an incredibly important thing to do. So I think this is basically what we need to do as business leaders. We have to keep our eye on the top line and those opportunities, and what we need to do as those who have fiduciary responsibility for our organizations in order to advance them. Keeping in mind that there are risks. We go through that process we just talked about of identifying and prioritizing and working through how we're going to evaluate and mitigate and ultimately recover when there are problems in the cyberspace. So I wanted to start our thinking to bend from minimization to optimization, and I thought this was a good way to move our thinking in that direction.
That is, yeah. Howard, you want to add to this or move on? Or
No, I think it's a great point. And sometimes in managing risk, you find new efficiencies
Correct.
that create a competitive advantage.
More agility.
There's another way to think about enterprise risk management.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. Yeah. And then this next slide kind of, what's the song? One man's ceiling is another man's floor kind of thing. Howard, you and I were talking about this earlier this morning. Just the illustration of this slide I find phenomenal.
Yeah, I was surprised when Charla put this together because it's really an interesting example. So you have two types of risk. So this is actually the property and casualty insurance industry over a period of decades, looking at what they call hard and soft markets. So in a hard market, prices are going up, the terms are less favorable, there's less competition, and in a soft market, the insurance companies are competing for market share, driving prices down, offering more terms. And so you can see the ebb and flow. And from the insurance carrier's perspective, it's speculative. They're trying to make a profit based on the law of large numbers, and only so many people will have a loss, and that overall, that pool will be profitable. But for the insured, it's pure risk. They're just trying to be made whole. They're not going to make a profit on the insurance. And so this is really two different perspectives where you have upside and downside risk. Most pure risk are insurable, and speculative risk are not always insurable. It's difficult to insure your reputation. Sometimes when the toothpaste is out of the bottle, it's hard to get back in.
I've heard that, yes.
Yeah. I'm bringing it up again.
I've tried it.
Oh, you have? Okay.
I have kids. I've tried it.
Were you successful?
Negative.
Life happens, yeah. But good illustration. I mean, again, it's the different perspectives. What is a win for one side is not necessarily a win for the other side, and ultimately we got to keep the whole thing in balance, because if the insurance companies go out of business, they're out of business, and we can't take advantage of being able to transfer risk. But at the same time, if we go out of business, there's nothing to insure. So yeah. Let's go on to measuring risk and all. I mean, Charla, you've talked a lot already today about the top line and the bottom line, and that difference. And
Well, as Howard was saying, I think we are at this inflection point in history, not only globally but in the United States, given the huge switch that has happened in our civil society, and that is we have gone from information which was generated locally to information and data as a resource. So if you think about the early 1900s, when electricity was generated, when you had to make a car, when you wanted to manufacture something, you had to have your own generator at your facility in order to do that in the beginning. And then, of course, the General Electrics and the Westinghouses came along, and they created electricity as a utility. And that's what's happened to information and data as we've switched to the cloud. We no longer generate this locally. Now it is prolific and it is a utility. And just a little side note, you'll notice that most recently, our federal government has been thinking, it is a utility, perhaps it should be regulated as a utility. So we've just seen in the news some movement in that direction, which in my opinion is a good thing. So all of this comes together to mean that there is a premium now put on trust in the marketplace. And because of that premium, those organizations who wrap their minds around this risk optimization are going to be able to create sustainable competitive advantage. And if you can create a reputation and trust that that will sustain the ups and downs that are inevitable because you've made the right investments and you understand how you are going to address problems when they come, not if they come, because I guarantee you they will come to a screen near you. You are then positioned to generate more and more wealth for your shareholders, for your employees, and ultimately achieve your objectives. So this is what it's all about. So the question is, how do you measure and those priorities and what you need to invest in order to get to that optimization point? And quite frankly, when we first started looking at this problem, Howard and I were working on this project with a few other colleagues who were, specialists in modeling. And initially I was thinking of kind of a Nash equilibrium. Is this an optimal control problem? But we realized it was not because of the dynamics in the system. So we've been working on, and one of the things that part of the toolkit in CYRP and part of the toolkit that one of the tools we hope people will walk away with in Cyber Secure SoCal are specific ways to do this. To calibrate. And I think, Howard, you're going to talk a little bit more about the CIS framework, for example. So I'll just throw that ball into your court.
Yeah, I just want to say it was really interesting listening to you and thinking about, regardless of the ethical side you're on, because the cyber criminal enterprises are providing crime as a service, including customer service to back up that level of trust. Getting into those networks it's very critical for criminals to preserve that trust so that they're not compromised, as well as it's important for us to protect our intellectual property. But Stan, you've been doing more work in this area with CIS and as an information security professional. You have some thoughts on this?
Right. What we see, we're looking at the CIS, Center for Internet Security. Many of you are familiar with their CIS 20, their 20 controls. Howard, you alluded to it already earlier. They've published a risk management framework, which is based both on the perspective of risk as we've been talking about it today, but one of the other things it brings into it is a lot of courtroom analysis and what's working and what are the expectations when you go into court, into trial on these things. And the objective here is to truly get something measurable. Again, it's based on the CIS 20, so we're not looking yet at enterprise risk. We're still looking down at the level of, what's the risk of not patching your systems, or what's the risk of not training your people? And again, looking at things like expected value, exposure, and probability, frequency, and things like that. And knowing what the cyber criminal kill chain looks like, starting with reconnaissance and the phishing attack, and then so on, and moving laterally. How do we put together? And it's a question, it's not yet an answer. The community is working on the answer, but how do we put together a model that you could, in fact, go to a security manager, the leadership team, the C-suite, the executives, wherever, and have them begin to fill out some, all right, let's ask a few questions about risk tolerance so we get a sense of, what you're going to want to do with risk, and put some actual numbers which we can begin to get out of things like the Verizon annual reports and so on, so that we begin to get some quantitative basis for making risk management decisions. And it's not there yet, but I see this as one of the big places we're headed that begins to infuse this whole discussion with some real quantitative analysis to it.
We present in some of the classes that Howard and I have taught at the business school, and we've worked with Laz. Many people know Laz from Blue Lava. On developing some tools which basically start with the premise of embedding this type of thinking in every initiative moving forward, not in an onerous way that is going to suck up a lot of time, but using some very simple ways to embed calculations of risk so that you can establish what it's going to cost if we pay for this up front, what is it going to cost if we pay for it later? And therefore, we can make an informed decision about the types of things that Howard was talking about. Do we transfer this risk? Do we absorb it and then just somehow put that as part of a budgetary element into the initiative, whether that's a sweepstakes campaign for the holidays or whether that's you know, an NPD, new product development, or whether that's you know, in a new rollout of a self-service system. If we embed this on the front end and we start thinking about it as part of our project management thinking, then I think we can get at some answers to that question in terms of, you know, how can we really equip ourselves to advance quickly in elements that are important for the top line, but at the same time protect the bottom line, understanding that that comes with a cost.
Yeah, one of the classes that Charla, I worked on together with Charla, was really fascinating to me was emerging risk and cybersecurity, where we were looking at blockchain, bioinformatics, AI, VR, and looking at the potential risk and looking at the reward and the opportunities, and having a framework to quickly kind of evaluate this and have executives get their head around it, leading to a way to kind of score it and optimize that risk. And then from there, if you were to build in some of the key risk management objectives into that, you could more readily assure that you would have a greater successful outcome by that preliminary work of knowing what you might be up against in the future, and then have that cost benefit analysis, factor it in, and then have a greater chance of success, which ultimately leads to long-term sustainability.
That's right. Yeah, go ahead, Charla. Yeah.
Sorry, Stan. I started to say, adding on what Howard said, what this helps us do fundamentally is ask better questions. One of the things that I really drew out of our emerging technologies and risk class was the importance of helping boards and executives and IT practitioners ask better questions. Given the dynamic nature of this problem, if we can develop that capacity and even institutionalize it, then I think we have the posture that we need to be resilient and ultimately to persevere. So, so I'm really excited to have this opportunity to kind of talk about this with you guys.
Totally, you are. And again, it's another shout out, if you will, for October 17th. Come to Cybersecure SoCal 2019. The cybersecurity is a team sport, because it is in both asking the questions, but asking them in a collective way. That this is, what is this elephant? And we are all blind, so we are all seeing parts of it. How do, by asking questions and discussing it, we can begin to get our arms around it. I want to move on to the last slide, which, Charla, this is from you. We're going to do a video. We've never done a video in a webinar yet before, so this is our first opportunity. But what's so brilliant about this, it's a little video, is that you see people believing one thing, they're seeing something, and then all of a sudden they begin to understand that what they're seeing is the front end of what's happening, of what's coming, and it's an oh my God moment. This way, it's the tsunami that was in Southeast Asia a couple of years ago. I've got to unplug my headset from the computer, or nobody's going to be able to hear the audio on this, except me, which isn't very good. And then I'll put my headset back in. I'm going to unplug my headset, turn on this little video, and then put my headset back in when I'm finished. So hang in there.
My wife looked at me and said, "Hey, what's going up there? The water's gone." In so kurzer Zeit, ne? somebody had taken the plug out of the sea, and people were drawn to it because it looked so strange. There was a sense of calm. There was no sense of panic whatsoever. You could see forming up from left to right a beautiful crescent on the horizon. It looked quite lovely. We were spellbound, everybody was looking at it. But at that time, there was no way to know how big the wave was.
Die brechen da hinten, die Wellen, die brechen da hinten noch heftig, oder? Alter Schwede. I filmed the scene again and again. Was ist da? I was in a special way fascinated about it. Guck mal da hinten, Schmigi, wie das hochpasht. Das Wasser. I said to myself, hey, what a perfect wave. Hammer. Was da hinten abgeht. Nein. Aber da hinten, da geht's voran. ผมรบกวนแจ้งแขกจังดูนะครับตอนนี้มี
Now, I think what's important about this, and Van Gies, this is part of Van Gies, he did a lecture about their book, Exponential Organizations. And one of the important things about this is, and this isn't provided for any to be morbid, but to make the point that we interpret the world around us based on an existing mental model. Everyone that you saw was interpreting what was happening based on their existing mental model. And at one point even rejected the notion that, could this be related to the earthquake?
Yeah.
Because that was outside their experience, right? What we have to do now, and this is imperative, given where we are at this critical juncture in our history, we have to change our mental model and how we think about risk and work collaboratively in asking these questions and evaluating and providing better tools for executives and boards and IT practitioners so we can optimize rather than minimize risk. We can't build castles anymore. We're building cities. We're building something much bigger and much more important than that. So we have to change our mental model in order to create the civil society with the safety measures that we have. And I'm so grateful to you and Stan and you, Howard, for just being a part of that effort with Secure the Village and all the tremendous work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Oh, God, Charla, we feel exactly that same way about you, and I feel Howard. I mean, Howard, you're on the board. Charla, you're on the leadership council. Looking at this slide, we have to warn the tourists. You know, that's the mantra of the CYRP program and of the work that Secure the Village is doing and the work that Los Angeles Cyber Lab is doing. We're working with them and all the people working in education from the K through 12 area up through, you know, CYRP and the work at USC and so on. I'm so grateful to both of you for being here. We're just about wrapping up. Any last words before I shift into where we're going next?
Not at all. Let's go.
Okay. So next time we're going to keep the dialogue going around, you know, just how do we, it's a team sport. How do we get everybody involved? And my guest next time, some of you may know Bob Zukas. Bob's the CEO and founder of the Digital Directors Network. And the Digital Directors Network, I'm a member of them, is all about how do we get more technology, digital talent on boards, helping boards make the kinds of really challenging decisions, optimizing risk is just being one of the many things they have to do. So we'll be looking at both board leadership and the complementary side of it, board responsibilities. They go hand in hand. That's next September 5th. We'll go back to the schedule of first Thursday of every month. So September 5th is our next webinar with Bob. So please sign up, join us then. Just as this one was, all of these webinars are designed to be practical, real world, how to, and actionable, give you things to think about, but also things that you can take then back into the organization and actually do something with. There's a lot of things that we've got. I'm not going to go through this slide. If you're a follower of these webinars, you've seen this repeatedly, month in, month out. Most grateful to all the players on the Secure the Village team, Howard and Charla, you being two of them, for the thing we've done most recently, the minimum reasonable security practices. That's part of California Consumer Privacy Act that becomes an important thing. What's the minimum set of things a business, an organization has to do to be able to claim that they have reasonable security practices? As in reasonable security practices, that language shows up both in CCPA and in other parts of California law as well. We have a large upcoming calendar. There's so much on our program. Grateful to everybody who keeps saying, hey, come on, talk to us about this. The bottom one, given the three of us on here, we're so pushing towards a really successful Cyber Secure SoCal 2019. So please join us there. But join us at all of these, both the webinars and the physical in-person activities that we've got. Here's a slide with Howard and Charla's contact information. Don't hesitate to reach out to them, link into them on LinkedIn, link into Secure the Village, connect with us as well. And just know that our company, Citadel, now for 10 years, has been publishing a weekly cybersecurity news of the week and weekend vulnerability report. It's free. Please follow us. Help yourself to sign up for that. And if you're at all interested in cybersecurity, we implore you to get involved. It truly takes a village. Follow us on LinkedIn, come to our events, join our leadership council. There's about 50 of us right now. We don't set official sales goals, if you will, but there's no reason why that number can't get up into the hundreds within the next year. And if you want to sponsor one of these events or sponsor any of our others, please let us know. Email us, and we'll be happy to work with you to put a sponsorship program together that works for you, including a lot of sponsorship opportunities available for Cyber Secure SoCal 2019. That's going to be, we'll have about 100 people at Pepperdine. If it's like last year, I think we have room for 10 or 12 sponsors, and we're just beginning to get those now. So space is limited. Sign up now, as the saying goes. Yeah. With that, let me thank Charla, Howard. Thank you. Thank all the attendees. We're truly grateful to have you as part of our village. With that, we are adjourned. We'll see you later. Bye.
Thank you, Stan. Thank you, audience.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.